I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Centennial Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on in the program, a one-on-one with Curtis Hubbard, the new editorial editor at the Denver Post. But first, my old friend and mentor, sorry to tell you that, but it's true, John Andrews, without whom I'd have no job. So thank you.
Great to be with you, John. You're doing a good job over there at the Independence Institute.
You started II back in 1926.
85, and I had in mind a jobs program that would eventually mature for Jon Caldara.
Good God.
If only Jon Caldara would mature.
You know, weren't for you, the only thing I'd be saying into a microphone is, would you like fries with that? All right, I've known for forever you've been wanting to write a book. You fancy yourself a writer. I never thought it true until you came out with Responsibility Reborn, available in a bookstore near you. I was first taken, not with the name, but with Nixon. Before we go to the name, you've got all these incredible people on this cover, including Jefferson and Lincoln and Reagan and Nixon. Are you kidding me? Nixon? Why in the world would Nixon make it to a book cover for you?
The photo gallery on the cover of Responsibility Reborn is 8 men, 7 of them heroes of freedom and responsibility. One, a man who got to the world's most powerful office, but with terrific character flaws that were suspected before he got there. They came to light under pressure. The only president ever to resign his office in the middle of a term, Richard Nixon. I worked for Nixon, John, as a young press office staffer, and then for 3 years as part of his speechwriting team with people like Patrick Buchanan and William Safire, John McLaughlin, Ben Stein. And it was a formative experience for me as someone who loves this country, loves issues and ideas, public policy, and constitutional government. In the case of the Watergate scandal, how not to do constitutional government, how not to do rule of law. But the theme of the book, that responsibility is the price of freedom and the condition of America's success and prosperity, was illustrated powerfully in the 1970s when Americans seemed to have forgotten that. And part of America headed off the cliff in the 70s was the first resignation of a president under scandal, potentially under criminal indictment till Gerald Ford, his successor, pardoned Richard Nixon. I wanted Nixon on the cover because the book starts with lessons learned as I was a young Nixon speechwriter before age 30.
Did we bottom out with Nixon? I mean, I remember those times as a kid, and these were, my parents were worried about these problems. Was that the low point for America, or is now the low point? And I mean this, I guess, fiscally speaking, but also the direction of where we're going. I'm concerned by our debt. I'm concerned by the overregulation. I'm concerned by the outreach from Washington into every part of our lives, including now our own bodies with Obamacare. Tell me, you've seen both. What is the lesson?
Well, our hero Jefferson, who helped drafted the Declaration of Independence, is on the cover of my book. Reagan, another of our modern-day heroes of liberty, is on the cover of the book. Jefferson warned, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Reagan warned, freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. To your question, what's the bottom for America? The book traces back at least a century and then tries to look ahead into the 21st century, and I argue that there's a cyclical problem of Americans or any free people losing focus, forgetting that personal responsibility is always the price, the balancing factor to individual freedom. We get it, and then we lose it. We get it, and then we lose it again. America was being given up as a nation in terminal decline in the 70s, especially under Jimmy Carter. Carter goes into the Oval Office. He's got the thermostat in the White House turned down. He's got his little cardigan sweater on, and he's saying, it's time for Americans to realize lower expectations are our future. Our best days are probably behind us. He didn't use the word malaise, but became called the malaise speech. Soviets rampaging around the world, stagflation in a stuck, dead economy. Riots, presidential assassinations in recent memory, gas lines, the sense that America was losing it. We came back by electing Reagan, but Reagan, John, I think, was simply a result of the American people looking in the mirror and realizing, hey, we're better than this. We're not going to lose freedom on our watch. We understand that by individuals, families, communities, churches, voluntary associations, neighborhoods, taking responsibility for ourselves, we can turn this country around. We've done it before. That's why I believe we can do it again, as bad as things seem right now. We need a rebirth of responsibility. And to come to current politics and headlines, I believe that the responsibility movement I hoped for when I wrote this book in 2007, 2008, came about in 2009, called the Tea Party.
When you talk about personal responsibility, those of us who are free marketeers, we understand this concept. We almost take it for granted. We understand that contractual law, property rights, all require personal responsibility, and that's the way it works. And when you start getting rid of private property rights, constitutional law, and the marketplace, those bits of personal responsibility leave. How in the world, if we're not responsible for our own retirement, we're not responsible for our own health care decisions, we're not responsible for our kids' education decisions, you want responsibility to be reborn. I don't know how that is, given today's acceptance of an ever-enlarging and entwined government.
It's got to happen one American, one family, one neighborhood at a time. That's why I think it's valuable that your Independence Institute and my Centennial Institute are reminding Coloradans there are school board elections, city council elections this fall. There's battles to be fought right here in your backyard. Then let's talk about the U.S. Senate and the White House in 2012. Jon, we're very close to a tipping point, you know this very well, where there are more takers than makers. And far-sighted historians and economists were warning of this even around the time of the American founding. There was a Scottish historian named Tytler that I quote in the book who says, the time will come when people in a democracy realize they can vote themselves benefits from the public treasury, the takers outvote the makers. You hit a tipping point and you decline. We're very close to that in America, but we're not there yet, and I think the Tea Party proves we're not,
How do you know we're not there? Let me be what negative people call pragmatic. All right, let me be pragmatic. We now have a debt that is over 100% of our GDP. We've now finally had our bonds, our debt downgraded, and it's been about time. We're going to have a terrible time paying off this debt unless we have some sort of hyperinflation or some sort of massive economic growth, which I don't see on the corner. How is it that we're going to get responsibility if every American is now, or most Americans, are taking more from government than they are putting in? The math doesn't work.
We still have the opportunity to get up every morning and decide I'm going to be part of the solution, not part of the problem today. Start with our immediate surroundings, our job, our family, our community, our church, the charities we contribute to, so government does not always have to be the safety net. We can start making a difference one at a time. I'd rather light a candle than curse the darkness. I believe the battle is its own reward. I can't sit here and say for sure.
You optimists drive me crazy.
I can't sit here and say for sure that America will hit its 300th birthday, 2076, in great shape, because historians, Tytler, another British historian, John Glubb, that I quote at length in the book, have predicted somewhere between 200 250 years, great nations commit fiscal suicide. Doesn't that sound like the headlines in America after its 235th birthday this past July 4th? We still have the option, one by one, to do something about it. You can play the pessimist, but I know that you're working just as hard to pull it back from the brink as I am, and you're doing just what I am. Influence one person at a time. You run a think tank. I run a think tank. You have a voice in the media. I have a voice in the media. I had the dream as a kid to write a book. I'm glad that the 10 false starts on my book didn't come to pass, because when I wrote the book, now is the time that this personal responsibility message has never been more needed in America.
I got most of the people on this cover, and I found it pretty fascinating. Tocqueville was the one I couldn't get, Alexis de Tocqueville, but also this guy. Why don't you tell a quick story about this? Well, he looks like a communist.
When you were a child, there was something called the Cold War.
I don't remember.
And while you were watching Sesame Street, there was a life and death struggle as to whether the Soviet system would prevail and communism, or at the very least, the so-called mixed economy, soft socialism, would take over the world. Khrushchev says, "We will bury you," to Vice President Nixon in 1959. The Cold War turned partly when a brave man, Solzhenitsyn, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, comes out of the Soviet Gulag, the vast prison camps of the USSR, bears witness in a novel about how ugly it was in there, that the Soviet dream was a nightmare. He is exiled to the West. Jerry Ford wouldn't see him at the White House, Ford having succeeded Nixon, who was driven out of office when I worked for him. wanted to curry favor with Brezhnev, the Soviet dictator. That was part of the symptoms of decline in America in the 1970s. Solzhenitsyn is invited to Harvard. For once, Harvard's motto, veritas or truth, was borne out. And Solzhenitsyn gives the most powerful address at Harvard commencement in 1978, warning, hey, America, you're headed over the cliff. You've lost your courage, you've lost your way, you've lost your moral compass, but it's not too late. He says, be careful. Even if you don't lose the Cold War to the Soviet Union, you may lose the moral battle. America pulled it back. That's why I have Solzhenitsyn as one of my key chapters in the book, Responsibility Reborn. He was a hero of responsibility.
When you say a moral battle, is that more important than the taxes and the finances, the debt that we're dealing right now?
It also,
how is a spiritual book going to change that?
This book is written out of my convictions as a follower of Jesus Christ, but there is not a religious word in it. The book is written in the language of common sense, or what our founders called the law of nature, natural law. Anyone who thinks realizes if we don't all take some responsibility for ourselves, the system will collapse. The great French writer Bastiat says in 1850, the state is the fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. You're constantly fighting that from Independence Institute. I fight it from Centennial Institute, Colorado Christian University. It will not work. So there is a moral and spiritual core to the book in the sense that most people realize I didn't get here by accident. I'm not just 98 cents worth of biological slime and chemicals.
Don't worry, with hyperinflation, that's going to be $1.50 before you know it.
There's a creator that put me here, and I have the capability to make a difference and the responsibility to make a difference and look out for myself. So I've tried as a Christian, John, to write the book in the language of folks, whether or not they live a God-centered life.
The subtitle of this, The Citizen's Guide to the Next American Century. All right, you're an optimist. If there's one lesson, we got less than a minute here, if there's one lesson you want people to walk away with, what is it?
Freedom can be its own worst enemy.
How so?
It makes us soft. It slips away. We get complacent. Success can be its own worst enemy because without responsibility, you don't succeed, but then success goes to your head and you think, oh, I can phone it in. This is my entitlement. What a toxic word in America today, entitlement. I'm not entitled to what you've earned, saved up, inherited from your parents, want to pass on to your kids. No, I have a responsibility to look out for myself. If you want to be charitable to me out of the goodness of your heart, great, but I'm not entitled to what you have. Freedom can be its own worst enemy. The antidote is responsibility. Success can undermine itself. The antidote is responsibility.
You've been in this fight since your mid to late 20s. With just a couple seconds left, are you optimistic that we can continue? Let me put it differently. Are you as fired up now as you were when you were 25?
I am more fired up because I feel that the lessons of life getting me to the stage of a grandfather age 67, I've got a chance to give back to this country. And the message I'm giving back is personal responsibility.
Responsibility Reborn. Go to responsibilityreborn.com. Jon, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Stay tuned.